Welcome, fans, to the 58th edition of Changeover Chat, presented by Sportmaster Sports Surfaces. I'm your host, Randy Master. Today's guest is one of the most respected, talented, and just plain pleasant executives in the sports and entertainment business. He started his career at ProServe and went on to become president and COO of the WTA Tour in 2000. He then became a successful live event and television producer, working with such giants as William Morris, NBC Universal, and Caesars Entertainment. Our guest then took up residence in Vegas and rose to senior level positions at the Cosmopolitan and Life is Beautiful. He then joined GF Sports and oversaw the New York Open and the very successful BB&T Atlanta Open. In September of 19, he moved on to become an SVP at IMG, overseeing operations and execution of one of the premier events in all of pro tennis, the Miami Open. He is a graduate of George Washington University, where he was a 4-year starter on the men's tennis team, then became the tennis coach there. Please welcome my friend, or at least I think he's my friend, Josh Ripple.
Oh, Randy, after that, I have to be your friend. That was quite the introduction. It's great to be here. And we are friends, and we've been friends for many years. It's
Well,
it's great to join your show.
no, it's great having you on. So I wanted to start back to your playing days. Obviously, you were a standout at GW. You then became a coach. And for how many years, Josh, were you a coach?
I was coach of the men's team for a couple of years. Um, played there for 4 years, and was really fortunate to they had the confidence in me to stay on and do some coaching on the men's
Yeah.
side for a couple of years.
And then so after your coaching career, you move on to the very, very competitive world of the of ProServe in DC, which everyone knows it was started by Donald Dell, and it was a really a breeding ground for great agents for years and years to come. How did you make that transition from coaching tennis into that world?
Well, yeah, I was really fortunate because going to school in Washington, D.C., um, and being at GW, the two main men's and women's indoor events, which back then they were called Virginia Slims of Washington. I hate to date myself, but Virginia Slims of Washington and the Volvo Classic on the men's side, they both were played at the Smith Center, which was GW's main arena, athletic hall. And I got to know them really starting there because of the tennis background. Um, and again, fortunate because back in those days, there really were only two. And today, it's proliferated to hundreds. But back in those days, you really had two major sports marketing and management companies. One which was ProServe, as you stated, and the other one was IMG, as everybody knows. So, tennis circles were really good to me. I was able to get there pretty much off the days of my playing there at GW and being there in Washington.
Yeah. So in obviously you took that tennis experience, you moved on in 2000 to become president and COO of the WTA Tour. Actually, at that time, Josh, it was the Sanex WTA Tour, if I'm right. So I was looking back at the rankings today. There was no shortage of star power. Obviously, Serena was in the mix. Lindsay, Sellis, Venus, Hingis, Kornikova. The list goes on. I noticed, Josh, that there were a lot of change when you were president. There were a whole lot of changes at that level right above you. I think there was Bart McGuire and Kevin Wolf and Larry Scott. What was that all about? Just trying to find the right fit, and were they just facing so many challenges that they had to shuffle some stuff around?
It's a great question. It was a very unsettled time back in those days. You had a scenario where Bart McGuire, when I started there, Bart McGuire was the CEO of the tour. Bart really was involved heavily in the arbitration aspect of bringing the WTA, the players and the tournaments together for the several years prior to my getting there. Bart, one of the smartest guys I know, one of the nicest men I know, he entered into right during those late 90s, early 2000s. There was really just a general transition. The players were transitioning, the stars were different, the geographies were changing. For so long it had been such a U.S. dominated business, and right around that time, things started to shift. I mean, players, while Serena and Venus were the ones who really were dominant back in those days, and they were really young, you had an influx of international players that really started to again sort of shift the game away from just being a U.S. centric event, U.S. centric type of tour and business to much more of an international business.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. You've worked on both sides of the games, on the ATP and the WTA side. 2000, there were, and a lot of people that might not know the history of the ATP or WTA, in 2000 in the United States, Oklahoma City, Scottsdale, Amelia Island, Hilton Head, Stanford, San Diego, New Haven, Philly, and the year-end championships. That doesn't even include the combined events. Now, and unfortunately, because me and you are tennis people, and we'd love to see more events in the U.S., you have the Volvo, which Bob Moran does a great job with. You have San Jose, which you know a little bit about under the IMG umbrella. And now Cleveland, the folks at Top Notch, are going to bring a 250 there. And then you have the combined events. So does it go back to what you were just talking about? The sport was just becoming more international, not only from a player standpoint, but from a tournament standpoint at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on what your perspective is. I mean, I think that as Americans, and people like you and I, we're close in age. You're not, you're a little bit younger than me, but close in age, and you have a perspective. I mean, the sport really, really was, it was built in the United States. So the stars were Americans. The big tournaments were primarily in America outside of the Grand Slams. Obviously, there were other great tournaments outside the United States, but it was very, as I said earlier, very U.S. centric. There's an argument that said, thank God that the event became the tour and the business became much, much more international. Just as basic markets have changed and the evolution, the maturation of how Asia, started on the sports side of things, and Europe, when it went from sort of being Europe being a stepchild to Europe becoming dominant, it just shifted. And to a certain extent, I think it was good for tennis, frankly, in general, because you then sort of the wealth of the game was spread out much, much more than just in the US, where again, when you put all those eggs in one basket, it's only inevitable that some of those eggs are going to crack, and it's not really sustainable. So it was interesting when I was at the WTA, one of the most controversial decisions, just as I was getting in there, was that the culminating event, which was the championships, WTA championships, was held at Madison Square Garden for many, many years. And right as I got there, really the first year I was there, I believe, it shifted and went over to Europe and went into Germany.
Yeah.
And just moving the championships over there was a tremendous sort of, it symbolized what was happening in the game itself. There was a lot more money being generated over in Europe and in Asia. And so there were many, many other people that wanted to just be part of the game.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, it's a great perspective because you are a little bit older than me. So you have that perspective that I don't have. Just you were at the tour when I was kind of following the tour as someone a little bit younger, but
you were just born.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. So, so anyway, you told me we would start laughing at some point. So
Mhm.
you spend a number of years after the WTA in sports production, events, really becoming an entertainment specialist, putting on shows and understanding what fans wanted to see. I remember when we were at the BB&T Atlanta Open, I thought the show that you put on down there was incredible, and we were working together at that time. And I was out there one night, and there was a great PA guy and master of ceremonies, and things were lighting up, and the players enter. And I was like, Josh, this is pretty good stuff. And you're like, Randy, what did you expect? I think saying, hey, I've been doing this for a long time, but that's clearly a specialty that you have, and that takes me into you finally recently you joined IMG in 2019, take a very high level position at the Miami Open with James Blake was tournament director. Now, Josh, you had been to the Key Biscayne site for many, many, many years, and it's nostalgic for so many of us. Now, that tournament basically went from Key Biscayne to something completely the opposite to where you are in Miami Gardens right now. Did that was that a little bit intimidating, overwhelming, or just exciting because you were going to be part of? They had the tournament for 1 year, but now you were going to be part of this massive event that has so much potential.
Well, it's definitely exciting. I mean, that the idea, it's interesting. Butch Buchholz, who, started the Miami Open many, many years ago, 35 years ago, we were actually joking about it. I think I just started in the business right when he started the Miami Open. I was working, as you said earlier, I was working for ProServe. 35 years later, come full circle, working for the competitor of ProServe, now, working for the Miami Open. It was weird, but it was great. But to answer your question, it was very exciting. The prospect of finally, after so many years, and you know this very, very well. I mean, you could be working in this business for 25, 30 years and working on small events, never have the chance to be part of a major event, not having anything to do with your skill set or your business acumen,
Right.
just who owns the events and how they fall on the calendar. So, you know, it was the first time that in tennis at least, where you could be part of a winner with a big machine. And so it was I was thrilled when IMG came and asked if I wanted to be part of it, because not only was it the big tennis tournament, but as you said earlier, it was transitioning from this iconic event in Key Biscayne where a lot of people were very disappointed that it left Key Biscayne.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you were moving it up the street a little bit to work with the Miami Dolphins in Hard Rock Stadium and Stephen Ross. Um, and the opportunities really became sort of limitless to a certain
Yeah.
extent. Limitless from the standpoint of geography, meaning the footprint. And you probably know this. I mean, some of the issues that the Miami Open had over the years was that there at Crandon Park, it was beautiful, but it was just there was very little ability for it to expand.
Yeah.
You couldn't build out. You were just sort of you're locked.
Right.
And at Hard Rock Stadium, it is a completely different story. You just have acres and acres of land in which you can develop the footprint in a way that a major event should be produced.
Yeah.
And what was very cool was that you had this opportunity where you would be able to build this, 16,000 seat stadium inside in the Miami Dolphins stadium, which was, the 12th wonder of the world, so to speak, as it relates to tennis. But I think all of those opportunities were great for me personally, because at this point in my career, being in tennis, I think all of us who start in tennis somehow were always pulled back into tennis. But to be able, and hopefully this would be my last job, but to be able to be part of the Miami Open and be part of working with IMG and the partners at the Miami Dolphins is a home run.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I had been to the 2019 edition, And yeah, it was a little strange. And I think with anybody, any fan, there's like a little bit of nostalgia. Hey, I wish we could just go back. But after I'd been there a couple days, I'm like, this is really cool. It has nowhere to go but up. So you join before the 2020 edition with James. I would say about 6 months maybe before the tournament was supposed to take place, somewhere in that vicinity.
September in September
Yeah.
of 19. Yeah.
So you hit the ground running, and ultimately Indian Wells gets canceled. We could see the virus kind of on the move. The mayor of Miami declares a state of emergency. You had been planning for 400,000 plus fans, an international audience, big paying sponsors, and then Josh, your world, James's world, your entire world down there turns upside down. Now, one question I was thinking about, one question I had is, and we had talked a little bit after that, and you were in kind of cleanup mode per se. Do you think it was harder to um, wrap up a tournament that actually took place with all of these huge things happening and all the sponsorship wrap ups and everything? Do you think that's harder to wrap up? Or was it harder to wrap up a tournament that didn't happen?
Well, it was. I don't comparing them is sort of difficult, but
Right,
it it was sad. I mean,
right.
there's usually when you end the tournament and you wrap up, your combination of exhausted and hopefully if you're successful, you're sort of ebullient about
Yeah,
what's happened. So the end of it becomes it's fantastic from that standpoint. That's why events are so cool because you just have a little bit of a beginning and an end. In 2000 for the 2020 Miami Open, it was as sad could be. I mean,
yeah,
it was financially a massive challenge to be a promoter at that moment in time, to basically cancel it 5 days before the players were supposed to show up, to be 90% built.
yeah,
Um, it was really a tough scenario for all of us. It certainly wasn't an opportunity. It wasn't a challenge that I was looking forward to or thought I would ever have to deal with. But I think that we were lucky from the standpoint that, again, from the scale and the size of a company like IMG and Endeavor, um, and the partnership with the Dolphins, we we dealt with it the best way we possibly could, and we were all committed that we have to take our lumps, but we were going to get back into the game as soon as we possibly could. And fast forward to 2021, it was really, we were committed somehow to put that event on in some way, shape, or form. We really didn't want to be out of the marketplace for 2 years. But to answer your question, it's completely a different scenario,
yeah.
a complete bust, a complete depressing moment when when you're there and you have all these people looking at you, and you're sitting there at the table and you've got 25 people looking at you. What do we do now? You know, thankfully I had some experience, and thankfully we were able to you know, come out of it pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then everybody got excited for the 2021 event. And I have to ask again, you're in a territory that you hadn't really been in before. Nobody had been in before, but you have to play in a tournament that last year everybody was like, okay, we'll be back to normal 2021. We're going to blow this thing out the Miami Open. Every tournament's kind of in the same position now.
Every sporting event is
Yeah,
probably saying the same thing.
no, absolutely. So, Josh, there had been some tournaments that had operated under these circumstances, obviously, one being the US Open and the other being the Australian Open, two slams. Did you consult with any of those folks to try to originally to just try to get a feel for how they approached the tournament that was to come and keeping the players safe
Yeah.
and how to accommodate everyone?
Yeah, I mean, of course. And thankfully, a lot of them are close friends. And so, there was no lack of collaboration with those people. That's the great thing about the tennis community. We're all very, very close, and everybody wants to help each other out. I mean, listen, everybody was learning on a day-to-day basis. Things were changing on a day-to-day basis. You just you didn't know what was sort of coming next. We actually didn't make a decision to go forward until pretty much around Christmas time,
Yeah.
frankly. And you have to remember during that period of time, the virus was at its worst state, from the
Yeah.
standpoint of infections and deaths. So, you know, yeah, you had some very good learnings that were shared with us by some of the other tournaments. But what happened in the summer of 2020 really was so different in the wintertime in the beginning of 2021. It was just everything had changed. From the protocols to the, can you have fans? Can't you have fans? Some places in the country you were locked down. Some places in the country you're not. In Florida, it was very unique in its political approach to the, unfortunately, to the virus. And on one hand, it was a challenge, but on the other hand, it was an opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think I think that I think that it was a unique experience. The only other experience that I can remember having any resemblance was during 9/11.
Yeah.
And that's when I was actually at the WTA in that role. 9/11 was very similar in as much that, one day you were full blast and the next day you were shut down. And I was able to take some of those learnings, and most of the key learnings that came out of that were basically just from a personality standpoint, from a character standpoint, being calm and being organized, focused, being nimble. We share that with our team all the time. I think that in itself, we were a very calm group and calm organization, which helped us plan accordingly and make some good decisions to be able to go forward in
Yeah.
20.
And how proud are you of that, of your staff and the volunteers and everyone that
It
helped
was,
put this on? Because you see James. I want to ask you about James, but you see him out front. But as I know, and you know as well as anybody, it really does take a village, and
yeah,
it
yeah.
took more of a village this
It
year
it
because of
was
all the challenges.
Yeah, we couldn't be prouder of our people. And again, it's just it's such a different world. I mean, you were in a situation in 2020 where you had, I'm making up the number slightly. I don't remember how many people, but let's say you had 20 full-time people working on an event the size and the scope, the scale of Miami. And in 2021, we started the new year getting ready for the event with like 4 people. So, I mean, it was it was as similar as to running a 250, frankly, as you know, with so few people, but still but major pressures. The scale was not, any different. You still had 400 players that were coming. You still had to deal with all of those issues. Um, but the team is awesome. I mean, we have several key core people that have done it for many, many years. Kathy Stock, who's really my right and left arm there. She's the assistant tournament director and vice president of tennis events, and she was fantastic. There's no lack of institutional knowledge and no lack of basic, production coming out of her, and she led a really great team. And we were all with James. We were all able to, put together what we thought was a hell of an effort and a hell of a production,
Yeah.
given the situation.
Yeah, well, you've gotten high marks from people all over the industry. How do you think the players left in a good mood? It seemed like they were having a great time, which I failed to mention that football field, or whatever
Always,
you want to call it,
yeah,
almost like
always a
an
football
Olymp
field. Yeah,
an Olympic
there's always silver
stadium.
linings.
That was, you know, you have to give credit. Indian Wells has done something like that before.
Yeah.
People, that's not a secret. But what you guys did, I mean, that was an entire football field, and I wasn't there, but maybe more space, and they just seemed like they were having a blast, and that it kind of helped them release a bit because it was, they couldn't go down to Joe's or South Beach, or that was a big success, wasn't it, Josh?
Yeah, there are silver linings to everything. If it was a normal year, you would have been building a 16,000 seat stadium on that pitch. and the players have been sitting there going, "There's no place for us to, get out and train, and there's not enough field and all that." In this case, given the situation, we didn't build that stadium, and therefore they had the entire, you know, Hard Rock Stadium to do whatever they wanted to do. Listen, I think that the players themselves had come out of a pretty challenging scenario and environment in Australia. And I think that the emotional levels coming out of Australia were very high. And for them to come to Miami and continue to be in that bubble type of, as we refer to it as the protective environment, um, it was very difficult for them. I mean, we basically had a bubble within two hotels. They couldn't go outside the hotels. They, had to take buses to get to the site. You're limited with the numbers of people that can come. To your point, I mean, you were just very much limited in what you can do. And we did whatever we could to try to make it at least more homey. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And as you know, if players have good practice courts, good balls, some food, and a decent hotel, they're usually happy. And I think we did an overwhelmingly good job on pretty much all those fronts.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about James. James clearly is one of the nicest guys, former players out there still in tennis. He becomes tournament director in 2019. Now, James seems like James isn't James isn't a figurehead player. I mean, James is a smart smart guy, and it seems like Josh, and I just know this from, or I'm speculating that you guys have become uh, good friends. You complement each other well. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, listen, he's a champion. Number one, he was the top American for a few years. I mean, he's not only a nice guy, but he is really smart. He's really talented. He's really respected by the players. And the way our model works is, while while I have the honor, frankly, of overseeing the entire business there with our team, James is the guy. And thankfully, because it's something that I don't have that connection,
Right.
like James. James's job is really to deal with those players and to make them comfortable, make good decisions in the scheduling room, and work together with me and Kathy and our other in our just IMG family
Yeah.
to make sure that we're making very, very good decisions. So yes, we have become friends. I could not be prouder of him coming into this really blind a little bit, frankly. I mean, it's not like in 2020, there was a much greater lead in, ramp up, preparation for the event than there was in 21. In 21, we were just like, you know, drinking out of a little bit of a fire hose, but calmly. And, James was jumping in, 10 days before the event was to start. And he was just doing his thing.
Yeah.
Um, but he's incredibly talented, and the Miami Open is so lucky to have him and him as that face. He's great with the media. He's great with the players. He's great with the sponsors, and he's great with the people. So
Yeah.
couldn't be prouder. Couldn't be happier to have him, be our tournament director.
Yeah, not surprising. Now, the last thing on my list is 2022. I mean, you've got to be sitting there, Josh, right now, just chomping at the bit. Let's pray that we are out of this thing. Um, I'm just thinking you are, after 2020, you don't have the tournament. That was going to be your first year. It was your first year. A limited 2021. I'm thinking, Josh, you just want to blow this thing out of the out of the water.
All of us want to blow it out. You know,
um,
again, yeah.
any
Go ahead. I'm
pre
sorry.
any no, I was just going to ask any previews, anything up your sleeve, anything that's going to be different, or are you just going to come out all guns blazing and we'll kind of find out over the course of a year what's to come.
Well, a little bit of everything there. I mean, as you said earlier, my my sort of attitude and approach to these tennis events is that it has to be, and everybody says this, but not everybody does it, is to have it to be much more than a tennis event, even if the production elements are far greater than what a typical tennis event would be. For 2020, we had planned to have a major diversity and inclusion luncheon platform. We had University of Miami dual matches on tap. We were looking to do concerts. That is all going to happen in 2022. So I think the Miami Open that everybody will see in 2022 will be a far, more diverse event, many more things for people to do. And, I think what we also learned, and obviously we have to be somewhat cautious as it relates to the finances, of all this stuff, because still it's not a guarantee, as you say. Let's hope it's not a guarantee that things will come back to normal. But I think the one thing that we did learn is that you do have to diversify within your own little property portfolio. We saw that in the most tennis tournaments have seen that without the tickets, they're really crushed. And I think that we have to find ways of doing things that are just different and make it more unique. But we're really excited about 22. We've already started. We're very fortunate that many of our fans rolled over a lot of their ticket money from 20 to 21 and from 21 to 22. So we're starting in an accelerated way. Many of our sponsors, our long-term sponsors, have been amazingly supportive. Our presenting sponsor, Itaú, which is a Brazilian wealth management company and bank, they have stood with us, just shoulder to shoulder through all of this. And many of the other sponsors also, really wanted to make sure that tennis did happen in 2021. So I think everybody's just excited for what's going to happen in 22. Everybody wants to get this behind us and really try to get back to normal, especially in the entertainment world.
Yeah, and we're certainly looking forward to it at Tennis One. I wanted to thank your team and you in particular for the partnership and the hospitality that you gave our team, Laura and Rachel, and also working with Kristen on this partnership this year. It was we knocked it out of the park in our view, and it was because of the hospitality and accommodations by your team.
I think I'm remiss to say that, a lot of it also through you and the relationship that we have and what you bring to the party. But, we started with Tennis One, even when I was at GF Sports, trying to do some stuff with them. But, with Miami, we did start it in 2020. You all were amazing to get involved in 21 in any way, shape, or form that we could. The team is awesome. And I think we have to figure out how to make it bigger and better. 2022, it's another platform. And congratulations to you, because I think that this platform is something that is needed in our sport and in the entertainment world. And you bring a great perspective to it all. And you just got to keep doing it, keep getting better, and make sure that you keep putting more stuff in your back in your set there. And you can see some more of the unique thing. I wish that I was sort of inside that room to see what's there, but just keep going, Randy. It's a great show, and really honored that you had me on.
Oh, well, it's an honor to have you on, and I'm glad that we solidified the fact that we are friends at the beginning of the show. So anyway, Josh, thanks so much for coming on. And I love the Miami Open, and I cannot wait to get down there next year, God willing. And I'm sure the show that you guys are going to put on is going to be almost Super Bowl like, I feel like. So
we've got good partners who've done Super Bowls before.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're 100% right. Both of us will be there in 2022, Randy. Again, thanks.